My guest at this time is Pete Sepp, president of the National Taxpayers Union. He joins me today to explain why some taxpayers are getting frustrated over lower than expected refunds on their federal income tax returns. Some Democrats and media outlets contend smaller refunds are actually proof that the middle class did not get a tax cut, but actually a tax increase from the 2017 tax reform package. But what is the actual truth? That's what we'll dig into for the next few minutes. And Pete, thanks so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
California Senator and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris tweeted Monday that, quote, the average tax refund is down about $170 compared to last year. Let's call the president's tax cut what it is, a middle-class tax hike to line the pockets of already wealthy corporations and the 1%, unquote. The Washington Post, I saw this week, also did a fairly long story talking about the personal struggles of people who are getting smaller refunds than they're used to. So are folks in the middle class really paying higher taxes this year?
They certainly aren't. And those like the Washington Post and Senator Harris who are making these claims are just being disingenuous. When you take a look at the projections back in 2017 and early 2018 of the rate reductions thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the expansion of the standard deduction to allow more people to file using a simplified form rather than itemize, there were already estimates showing that a typical household would be saving about $2,100 per year. That's not from conservative sources. That's from the Tax Policy Center. 90% of families in the $40,000 to $200,000 range were going to receive a tax cut. The reason why some refunds appear to be lower, and we're talking about less than 10% lower, is that much of the tax cut already showed up in bigger paychecks throughout 2018. When you take the bigger paychecks from 2018, combine it with the refunds that people are seeing now, you're still getting a net tax cut. The problem is people have come to depend on large tax refunds to do things like make major purchases or pay down debts or put more money into savings. That's something you could be doing all during the current tax year so that even if your refund is smaller next year, you're still getting the benefit from it. That's the ugly truth here. A refund is not a sign of good tax planning. It's a sign you're lending the IRS money interest-free throughout the year.
Talk about that a little bit more, because I don't think a lot of folks understand that. Explain what really happens. You just did, but go into a little more detail about what a big refund really means.
Like any refund you would get at the store on a good or service, it's money you overpaid that's due back to you. So a tax refund is something you get in the following tax filing season because you overwithheld money from your paycheck, or if you're a small business owner, you paid too much to the IRS throughout the year in your quarterly estimated tax payments. It's your money that you were paying to the IRS in the first place. You're only getting it back when you file your taxes, and you're not getting any interest on that payment. The fact that you might get a smaller refund in a given year does not necessarily mean that you didn't get a tax cut the year before. It might have something to do with how you withhold your taxes. It might have something to do with your economic circumstances in a given year. And I would point out that all of this speculation right now is based on a couple weeks of tax filing statistics. We could very well see, and there have been projections from firms like Morgan Stanley, that when this filing season is over, average refunds could very well actually be higher than last year rather than lower. We just don't know yet.
Well, we'll certainly be watching. Got a few months left before all that data comes in. Is the ultimate goal, or should the ultimate goal be, to pretty much zero out? So in other words, if you're withholding correctly and accurately and the government is taking the appropriate sum from each check, do you want to basically have nothing to pay and nothing to get in a refund if everything works out correctly, so that way you can have that money in your check, and if you are able to save it, you can pick up a little interest on the side?
Yeah, absolutely. If you come out even Steven, so to speak, when you file your tax return, that means you've had full use of your own paycheck or business earnings throughout the year without giving the IRS an interest-free loan, and you're not worried about having to pay the IRS. Now, that's more of an art than a science. It's very difficult, even for sophisticated tax planners, to get their clients at a near zero, neither owing nor paying situation. But that doesn't mean that you can't take other steps. If through your current withholding, you're getting a $2,000 refund a year and you want to keep it that way, keep over withholding, but over withhold for a bank or a savings account or an IRA or a 401k. There are many companies that will take the extra money you want out of your paycheck that you'd normally give to the IRS, and they'll invest that on a monthly, biweekly basis, however you get your paychecks. That's a much better way to force yourself to save or invest than letting the IRS keep your money and then the following year saying, oh, I can now put this money in my 401k or IRA. Have it done in increments with your own paycheck. Don't give it away to the government.
We're talking with Pete Sepp, president of the National Taxpayers Union. And as our exit question here, Pete, I want to circle back to where we started, and that's with the Democrats like Senator Harris and media outlets like the Washington Post calling attention to folks who are upset that they're getting smaller refunds than they're used to, at least so far. And you use the word disingenuous. I should point out that after 11 paragraphs in the story I read of explaining the pains caused by the smaller returns, the Post did use its final few sentences to explain that take-home pay was higher for most folks, so the impression that folks had that they were paying more in taxes wasn't actually true, which, of course, undercuts the banner headline. So what message do you have for the media and some politicians as they react to seeing some of these stories?
Well, I tell the Washington Post, don't take 11 paragraphs to explain what should be obvious about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. If they want to do a story about people getting smaller than expected refunds, fairness demands that they also say much of those refunds came to people already through their paychecks throughout 2018. And that's an important thing to remember. Also, too, another reason to get your withholding as correct as you possibly can, if you're depending on the government to give you your refund in a shutdown situation or a situation at the state level where they're short of cash, those refunds can get delayed. Would not want to have to be in that situation.
Pete, we'll have to call time there. Thanks very much for helping us understand it a whole lot better, as usual.
Thanks for having me.
Pete Sepp is president of the National Taxpayers Union. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.